Okay, we are just waiting for a few things.
Niet nochmal aussteigen, wenn du es möchtest, dass da geshared wird, die große.
Ja, weil ich will das dann hinauf.
Okay, we will be back.
Right. We experienced a few technical difficulties, so we'll just have to wait for Mr. Prix to join back. They dropped out. I think they have to set some settings up to be able to share the screen.
Wolf, can Sophie get this thing worked out?
Okay, Mr. Prix is back.
Okay.
Hi, Sophie.
Hey, Thom. I'm trying to fix this here. So you're gonna start, right? So you're gonna share your screen now. And then when Wolf is showing his presentation, he will call me and then I will share his screen, okay? But you start sharing your screen now. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
cool.
I think we can start with Thom and then we'll continue with Mr. Prix.
Okay.
You want to start with me now?
Yes.
Looks like
yes.
Okay.
I think I fixed it now and Wolf's gonna give me a sign and I will set him up, okay? So,
okay.
Good luck.
Like all these beautiful drawings.
Are we okay?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to divide this. I'm going to keep this very kind of brief. I'm going to try to keep it 15, 20 minutes. And Wolf will know this thing because we've done this a couple times before and it's going to be similar. And it's going to hopefully lead to kind of a conversation because we know each other quite well and we've worked together. But I'm going to divide it up into kind of 5 kind of quick topics. And it's going to start with the conversation is the relationship of AI in various ways to architecture and to a particular studio environment. And it's going to start with desires, the ambitions you have in your architecture of which AI is useful, in terms of how are you going to put it to work. And in my case, it's going to start with interest in spontaneity and interest in streams of consciousness, and a stream of consciousness as an equivalent of looking for more complex processes, which are much more complex, that are the basis in my mind of most serious artistic activity. And then it's going to move into a direct relationship into a project of using that kind of set of interests. And then it's going to look at how over the last decade, the digital world has started shifting, or it's the possibilities of how it can, we can be useful within complex, subjective kind of territories, let's say. And then it's going to look at a project that's experimenting with that notion. And finally, its broader kind of implication. So I'm gonna start with the beginnings of my work from decades ago. We're interested in drawing as a method of thinking. And the drawings, maybe this is going to connect to a lot of Wolf stuff, aren't directly connected to architecture. They have to do with broad description of the world as seen in a very subjective sense. And it's the stream of consciousness, the subjectiveness of it is not located in any particular demand that has to do with any obligation of architecture. And it's previous to any kind of architecture, but I'm convinced it's going to have something to do with the development of my work as I organize things, if I give coherence to things, as I make connections that have to do with formal relationships and that have to do with the complexity of our world as it gets connected into the architectural kind of format. And then more recently, I've become, I should say, this world that comes out of sketchbooks, as it reaches architecture, has to become much more disciplined because we operate within a very precise world, let's say. And that's influenced my current thinking, which has also been connected to the digital world. So I've become interested over the last decade, and these are drawings now that I've done over the last 5 years. I've become interested in attempting to organize this intuitive stream of consciousness world. And it might sound like an oxymoron because I'm trying to organize and discipline you could say the undisciplinable, the unorganizable. And I'm trying to find complex relationships that can come out of this that I can control. And it has to do with an exercise of willfulness and chance. I'm trying to organize, or I'm trying to find a middle ground between chance behavior and the world of the spontaneous and the willfulness of organization. And out of that came, and I'm disciplining those sketches. And I'm aware as I do this that they're also get a little stiffer. And the stiffness comes out of the forcing the discipline of what was the completely kind of free, again, the stream of consciousness stuff. But at the same time, and I'm becoming more and more aware that this interest in organizing and in rationalizing the unrationalizable or the chance behavior is connected to a discipline that deals with a collective environment. That these are I can have conversations with people, and I can use this in terms of organizing our work architecturally. And then I'm organizing these early sketches, and they actually come out of a very disciplined kind of notion. In this case, they're made out of 4 components, and I'm looking at how I can organize those 4 components and get very, very different outputs. And it's going to be very, very much connected to the kind of issues I'm going to deal with in architecture. And they're going to have various characteristics, and I'm looking at them in terms of differentiation, how much I can differentiate each of these different pieces using the same language. And then what's different, that I'm reversing the order, is that I'm now drawing in 3 dimensions. And so the original thing, the object, whatever you want to call this stuff, is actually 3-dimensional, and the drawings are now analytical. And that would be a really key thing. The model's coming first and the drawings coming second. It's completely reversing the kind of history of how we worked, how I was trained, right? And what's taking place is these first, whatever the 3-dimensional sketches, whatever you want to call them, are in fact 3-dimensional. And the drawings you saw are in fact analytical to some degree. And again, what I'm looking at is using the same 4 base elements in a combinatory behavior, is looking at the diversity I can get operating on a site that in this case is a square. that's a given. And again, I'm making direct relationships to its future use to architecture. But what I'm looking at is the kind of the number of possibilities I can get out of the relationship of four discrete parts, all of it having to do with relationships, and that'd be a whole other subject. So I've been interested in architecture that not of objects, but in the relationship of objects, in the relationship of things that makes up the work. And then I can take this, and I have now over, again, in the recent past, I can take the drawing and I can make that into something very kind of literal in terms of its development of an idea of a building. So you're looking at this model, and I have no idea what it's called. It's not a sketch. It's not really a drawing. It's not quite a model, but it's this initial kind of the notion of an organizational idea, in this case for a campus that's going to be in Saint-Jean. It's a building that's half a kilometer long. And I can take that now and organize it in a much more disciplined way still, as it deals with these four components. And it eventually becomes the convention of a plan, and we can look at it now in terms of a convention, et cetera, that's going to lead to this. And what I'm going to find is a piece of work which is developed that's out of a process. The shapes here aren't my shapes. They're in between. They come out of the process. I'm working with the process versus the thing. And I'm finding, like in this case, you can, if you go back to the element, can I draw on this? Oh, I can't, can I? Oh, I can. You'll recognize there, if you looked at this thing, you're going to see shapes that come out of it that come directly from that process, right? And I'm making discriminatory notions, whether it's here or here, et cetera. And I'm somewhere between the process developing the work and me manipulating it in traditional terms, me having traditional control over that. And again, that same form now is seen as a kind of a literal piece, and it keeps translating. What I'm interested in is a work of infinite complexity that's coherent. So as you move through this, there's no section that is similar. And you have a series of very, very different experiences that are all organized within this series of this system of thinking. Okay, and now I'm going to go back, and I'm drawing again, and the drawings have the same kind of rules. They take place over 45 minutes, and they're trying to deal with the limitation of thinking, and the work of pure kind of spontaneity. And it's going to go back to this again, and I'm going to start with AI now, because what's happening, and just recently with advanced, I'm using AI in a very broad sense. It's going to be a use of a very particular type of scripting that's going to be start discussing AI type behavior. Let's say we're early on, right? And I'm going to take this piece of work I've done, and now I have a process that I can show you 100 of these, right? And what it does is it allows me an enormous advancement of looking at types of options that open up new opportunities, right? And this is just beginning, so I can take another one and do the same thing. And in a very, very rapid time, I can look at 100 options, 200 options, right? Versus the single thing I showed you, the piece. And what's really interesting, which should be a much longer conversation, I was trying to change this and slow it down and find 5 of them that I was going to show you, and that'll be the next time we talk. I couldn't get it done for this. What's really fascinating is, and there were any number of these that I found more engaging, compelling, useful than the one I did, that was manipulated more through my own single instinct, right, of going through one process. And again, in a process-driven architecture, reiteration has been key to all of my work. We'll look at things and we look at something, challenge it, talk about it, redo it, challenge, talk about it, redo it, and it goes through this reiterative process. And this is absolutely hugely important to kind of how we're going to work. And then we can work and at the speed that our synapse, we're going to work at the speed that you think, right? And the whole notion of modeling, it wasn't that long ago, I'm coming up with an idea, we're modeling it 5 days later, I'm looking at the model, right? And now I'm looking at it within 8 hours, 24 hours maybe, right? And you're operating in the very early stage of the creative process, of the generative process, right? At an incredibly different speed. And then there's a project we got recently that became kind of a prototype for this. We're taking very kind of literally this idea, and it's now a cube of what is it, 20-meter cube. And there are three 20-meter cube pavilions in Ningbo, China. And I'm going to show you in a very literal sense, I'm taking this notion of a reiterative language made out of 4 components, and I'm looking for kind of the differentiation. And again, like the larger project, as I look at sectional qualities, I look at the kind of properties of this, I'm getting kind of an infinite differentiation in terms of space. We discussed just before we went on the air, Wolf and I, that I think the role of architecture without any question in the digital world will be spatial. And we can hunker down and claim that as architecture. And that's still our role. And if anything, you could argue that the physical environment is going to become stronger, that is clearly the role of the architect in terms of organizing spatial possibilities. And what will happen is those are getting more and more kind of complicated. Let me move I can't myself see I got these names over everything. And so now we can look at it in different ways. And then we can come to the second one. And what again I'm looking at is kind of radically different kind of opportunities using the same system. I'm disciplining this thing in 3-dimension. And I'm looking for the kind of possibilities that take place that both come from that multiple process that we're not quite there yet, but next time I'll show you this, I'll show you 100 of these, and I can be able to discriminate between each of them and discuss the nature of their, I can critique them on various terms. And then the third one, and again, I'm looking for maximizing differentiation and looking for the kind of variation that comes out of this language as a kind of early experiment. And this is going to be very quickly going to become an AI kind of project that I can look at this and I can control these set of variables under this circumstance. And then of course, what takes place is the drawings are now kind of old school, but they're CAT scans. They're really not sections. And they operate more like a neurosurgeon would use them, that you're looking for some particular aspect of something, of understanding something through a CAT scan, through that sectional relationship. But they're no longer the derivation of the project. They're analytical. And then finally, there'll be something that shows the relationship of these various objects as they participate within, in this case, a cultural recreational environment. And then finally, 2 things happen. The thing I showed you is a very kind of literal experiment of using the direction of AI in a very, very kind of disciplined way, which depends on a kind of very literal process. But this same process opens up possibilities that are used in a much more relaxed way that just affect work that's taking place. And then I'm going to end with 2 images that would require a much longer conversation. I'm finding the usefulness of the complexity that's inherent in the outcome of this process is going to be urban, and it's going to have a huge effect on our urban work. And now we're at a place where we're asked as architects over ever shorter time periods to develop massive projects. This is a project that's 3/4 to a kilometer long. We have 4 months to develop a large fragment of a city, and we're looking at the requirements of developing the complexity of historic cities. And we're now able to completely utilize the necessity of tools that allow us to advance complex, multifaceted systems that respond to demands that are cultural, political, social, infrastructural, et cetera, and would be the, I think is going to be the real kind of usefulness of the discussion that I'm having to do with the advancement of dealing with complex systems and the usefulness of AI. Thank you.
Sophie!
Thank you. That was amazing.
Thom, you shorten up your lecture.
Yeah, I want to say we'll leave some time for conversation.
Yeah, but so I have to go through my much longer lecture, very.
What you want to do? I'm totally fine.
But what I like to state is that we are coming from a different corner. Yeah, very different, but we have the same goal to create a three-dimensional space. And it's funny to see how disciplined you are drawing in opposite to my drawings, and how structured you are thinking in order to get from architecture to architecture. I think this is because of your cultural background is very different from mine, because I would say the Americans are more Protestantic than the Austrians, and especially the Viennese. I think we are like, think about Holland or Abraham or Dominic, we are much more interested in the Baroque definition of space. And if you look at the cupolas of Baroque, how crazy they are. Yeah, namely, you build tons of material in the air, and then you call a painter, and these artists are painting away the material by open up this material to the sky. And this is so surreal. If you think about that, it's so surreal. And I was always fascinated by this surrealistic approach to architecture. Hold on a second. I have to call Sophie that I can share my screen.
Can I, before you start that, I'm going to say that based on our conversation between the two of us, I wrote 2 sentences that I thought would connect us. Both of them are interested in chance behavior. And one is that what I've been focusing on is the strategies that seek the unfinished, the incomplete, the open, the spontaneous. And they understand accident as the most fertile territory for invention and innovation. And the second one that this connects to is organizing randomness, strategies embracing uncertainty, the non sequitur, the ephemeral. All of this having to do with Malraux's notion of the end of the absolute. And again, that end of the absolute, the end of any notion of a single idealized thing, and this notion of this of openness that comes out of accident and chance behavior would be something I think that would connect us.
I'm sorry, I'm here. Thom, your drawings are amazing. I said you are the best graphic artist in our field.
So I cannot share. Okay.
Milton Glaser he died last week. Do you know Milton Glaser?
Yeah, but no.
He was a hero of mine when I was a student.
I can,
I wanted to be a graphic designer to start with, so whatever.
That's that?
Mine is Duster, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, it's working.
Can you see things?
Yes,
What do you see?
skies.
Yeah, I see your CHBL.
Yeah, this how blue becomes building.
Okay, I'm gonna continue.
Yeah,
my mission.
thank you. How blue becomes building. Three parts of the lecture. The first is that I state that our society lives on a very uncertain ground. The old structures are dying, but they are not dead yet. And the new structures are coming up, but they are not born yet. So this generation, the upcoming generation, has the big chance to influence the new upcoming structures. They should take the chance on every field, yeah? The old structures dying, yeah? They create a big wave like all the dying organisms is doing before it dies. It makes it very powerful movement. Like you can see on the politics, on the right-wing politics now, these old structures, autocratic structures are trying to manifest them, but they will die, whether they want it or not. But we, standing on this uncertain ground, not we, the young guys, can influence the new upcoming structures, which are not born yet. They can, by doing everything, every experiment, every innovation, trying out everything, in order to get an influence of the upcoming structures. Statement. The sustainability has 3 lines: ecology, economy, and don't forget the social line, where art and social thinking is embedded. People, the Green Party only look at the ecology. They don't look at the economy. The big industries are looking only at the economy. And everyone is forgetting the third very important social impact, namely art. So therefore, I say, in our way of thinking, we will not allow art to be exiled from architecture. This, it leads directly to the thing, Thom, we had the discussion that everybody is right, but nothing is correct. So don't believe the leaders. And this is a statement what I think about building and architecture. Building only becomes architecture if it reaches the meta level in form, meaning gestalt, content, construction, and material. So I'm really bored with this thing that everything is architecture and I can do whatever I want and the clay houses are the future of architecture. It's not true. It's true for them who says that, but it's not correct. So Himmelb, you know, Thom, was founded in the year we changed a paradigm. This was the first image where we, the mankind, could see our blue planet. So changing the paradigms when we founded Himmelb was very important, yeah. So material or structure was air, you know, and movable platforms. But we always wanted to change architecture radically and immediately. And it took us years to find out the weakest point where we can pick up the point and change the outcome. And we thought a long time, what could it be? And we figured out that the moment, the process of designing, if we could shorten it to an explosive moment, maybe in this explosive moment, we could get rid of all these restraints, economy, structure, material, taste. And maybe in this moment, we can liberate space, the three-dimensional space. At the very end of my lecture, this is the past. It shows what we did and what we built. At the very end, we have a movie called Deep Himmelb, and Daniel did it for us, which could be our architecture in the future. This is about 600 projects in 50 years or 60 years. Only 10% were built. So the approach to this kind of shape looks very undisciplined and not structured. But since we are brought up in Vienna, the city of pride, we learned that our subconscious is driving us more than the consciousness. So when we started to think about this moment of designing, we thought we have to exclude everything which is connected to architecture. And therefore, when we got a commission from an Austrian psychoanalyst who was living in San Francisco to build a house for him, my partner and me, we were talking about this house for days, but never ever thinking about architectural consequences. And I remember the day when I came in the office and it was clear for me how this house should work. And not seeing the space, I wasn't able to draw it, but yeah, this is just a code. What is architecture? My answer is always yes. And this is the discussion about architecture nowadays. Yeah, the peak of the visible peak of the iceberg is very important. And all the critics and the curators are talking about this peak. But much more dangerous, like we know from the Andrea Doria and the Titanic, is the invisible part. This is politics, economic, money, codes, rules, and so forth. But if we look at the pyramids right now, look, this is architecture. Everyone is agreeing that this is architecture. But if you look at the program, you see the program is a minor part of architecture. And if you translate it in the real world today, means that you have to get the meta level of Gestalt and all the other things which enables us to build our things, is the black part and the program. But if you go to the client, you will be fired immediately, because this is on the left side, the client brief, and on the right side, you see the client budget. So we architects, many architects in the world, and we act like a sardine swarm in the pool with sharks. But in opposite to the sardines, the architects don't have the swarm intelligence. See, this is what I miss in the, in the artificial intelligence. And I have to state that I will not be in the first row of the lemmings jumping over the cliff. I rather prefer to be in the last row. Complex systems, complex problems, only complex problems can only be solved with complex solution. The disadvantage of the complex solutions is that it's very hard to understand and it's very tough to communicate these solutions to the public. The simple solutions are very easy to understand, but I have to say that in opposite to the complex solutions, the simple solutions are never new. Yeah, this is what public space is a big discussion right now because we have to save public space in the city, and this is a good example for public and private space. I love you. This is the communication of the future. You don't look in the eyes of your lover. You call her and tell him, I love you. Everyone knows this painting. Michelangelo maybe would have painted it if he would live right now like this, but the reality is the other way around. Gravity, fuck gravity. Since we conquered the outer space, we get rid of gravity, and not by chance, not by chance. If you lie in Coop's chair, you take the same position like the astronauts when they overcome gravity. So therefore, since we are moving in the no gravity space sooner or later, the monocentric perspective is obsolete. So continuing the talk about our approach to changing architecture by shortening the moment of designing. I came to the office, it was a sunny day, I remember exactly, and I had the feeling that I know how we should build, I know how the emotional impact will be of the house we will design. And in order not to be led astray, because drawing was one of my favorite things at this time as well, in order not to be led astray from my ability to draw, I closed my eyes, and like the whale jumping, the diagram of the of the emotion of the house was drawn by my right hand and using the hand as a seismograph of the feeling which we will have if you go into the space. And this is the point of deconstructivist architecture. Namely, everyone confuses this term with cooperation and modeling things and breaking it apart. That's not correct. Derrida was a student of Freud, of course, and Freud was, like Derrida later on, was influenced by this concept of unconsciousness. And Derrida stated that in every text, in every music piece, in every painting, there is a so-called blind spot written unconsciously, painted unconsciously, or composed unconsciously. And this blind spot or white space rules the whole text. And knowing that, without knowing, the drawing was finished, and we did immediately a very small model, measured the model, and put it in the third dimension. You can see that the drawings, the overlay of the plans, the overlay showed that we used almost every line in order to keep this psychogram in the built house. Very simple house. The only thing which is more complex is the view and the construction, because this house is only sitting on one point on this wall. And these are not columns, because I don't like columns, because columns symbolize pressure. And these columns are not columns, but tension lines. Yeah, this is how it looks like. The same thing, the drawing for the rooftop, Thom mentioned it before. The rooftop as a drawing and as a building, same way. And I have to say, at this time we built that, it was not allowed in this district of Vienna to change the roof pitch, to change the material. Nothing was allowed except to cut windows in the existing roof, and this is our answer. And this is a strategy which I always tell my students, because you have to develop a strategy in order to get through all these codes and rules. The other thing, very quickly, it's a pavilion for opera. And as you know, if you want to have a good acoustic, you have to use concrete, mass. We couldn't we couldn't take concrete because it was a temporary pavilion. So we enlarged the surface by acoustic elements, which were developed by scripting two pieces of music I like. One is Mozart's Don Giovanni, and the other one is Jimi Hendrix, Excuse Me While I Kiss the Sky. And this is the outcome of the thing. And it really, and this is the first thing, I think, Daniel, you did it. Yeah? Daniel was at Coop at this time, and he did it, and we built it, and it worked very well. Also 100,000 possibilities, and we chose one, like Thom was mentioning in his case. And then we found out by a magazine, a scientific magazine, that in LA, there is a movie studio using a space arm. And we said we have to found that, because we don't want to measure the models by hand. It's not efficient enough. And this is the time I met Thom the first time. And the first thing we did in this method was the museum in Groningen. Yeah, we built in a shipyard, funny thing. And on this model for a high-rise in Melbourne, we used it as well. So this, and in this very small project is 8 by 8 meters. We used the scripting method as well. Daniel, did you do it? I think it was, yeah.
Yes.
And Sophie, together with Sophie, we took the curve of this this bone house in the neighborhood, which is from the medieval times, used the curve and modeled it along an abstract physical model. Done in a shipyard, brought to the little town, my hometown, little town, and the grain put it. The music is Stairways to Heaven. Yeah. And the funny thing is, it was done on the computer, designed on the computer, by hand, modified with hand, and built like in medieval times, because we wanted to have sharp edges, because it's different, it's breaking through the ceiling and creating the inner space, changing the inner space as well. And we took raw and very old craftsmen could do it, and we did it like that. This is a funny thing. And you know, this is what the polemic against Mies van der Rohe. Look how stupid the ceiling is sitting on the wall, and look at the joint of light which separates the ceiling from the wall by Corbusier. So references. And here you can see that our roof, our light tubes are breaking through the ceiling and giving the whole image, the inside a whole different image. The other thing is this, where we build this building is concrete and wood cladded with metal. The first idea and the Wunderkammer idea and the reference and the other reference to Catalan, how the client who is a baker who collects everything which is connected with bread and has 3,000 bits and pieces. And he came to us and said, I want to have a museum for my collection. And this was, I remembered immediately the Wunderkammer, where bits and pieces are combined. And of course, on Catalan, how he introduced a vertical exhibition, and we copied it and did it, and it looked, yeah. And the shape was done by the 3D scanner, developed it, which was the next step after the space arm and so forth and so forth. And the CNN machine did the pieces out of wood, and they were overlaid, and it looked like that. It looked like the Arche Noah, because the wood inside has a similar atmosphere like a wooden ship. And that's not so strange, because bread is almost that old, like the story of the Arche Noah. Yeah, and this is where we translated turbulence into space, also with the 3D scanner and the space arm, and out came a big column which saved a lot of construction weight and a lot of material, so we could stay in the budget. And the funny thing is, and this is a little bit different to my friends, that we always introduce ramps, bridges to our buildings, and the underside is also very important, because I always dream of flying buildings and to put it up. And this is a column. And when I saw these black handprints, it reminded me on the Stone Age paintings on caves, where people, in order to get possession of this space, they imprinted their hand. Yeah, by looking at that, it's a very ancient method to build things like that, crane and 2 workers. And we thought, why can't we do it with robots? And I think this will be the future of building, whether the people want it or not. Sooner or later, the Chinese companies who can do it will move into Europe, maybe to America as well. And then we have to, we will be able to build things in crazy things, spatial things in a very economic way. Yeah, this is Lyon, no movie. And this is the last thing we built in China. It's a 3-dimensional exhibition space, 2 exhibitions, one for space, one for modern art and one for architecture. They call it planning exhibition. And you can see that on the right hand, this the art part, on the left hand, the architectural part. In the middle is a kind of communication cloud. These are the rules and regulation for the codes which created the shapes. And this is the idea of a 3-dimensional exhibition space or a 3-dimensional Chinese garden. And this is how it looks like. And in the middle, the communication cloud is deriving from my favorite sculpture, Brancusi. We developed it further on and then we built it. Very funny. The north side and the south side look very different. And this is why we use not only artificial intelligence tools, but also digital tools in order to create, to react to the climate and to the light conditions. Very technical. There's a little bit of a reference, the architectural part is a little bit of a reference to the house on the falling water. And I have to say, yeah, this is, I would say it's Piranesi in our times. Bridges, ramps, that helps people to get an overview of the whole area and get the feeling of the 3-dimensional space by walking through the stairs, ramps, and bridging through the space. Here you can see how big it is. And this is the architect who presented the work to the mayor of Shenzhen, the cultural mayor of Shenzhen. Yeah, doing it like that. And on the right hand is very old fashioned. I think this is the future, how we will build, and artificial intelligence will be very helpful to get new building methods. What was that? Yeah. This is what I think. Okay, this is the office now. Maybe later on it will look like that if we plan too much with the robots. This is a winning entry for a scientific museum in China. This is a compact building for conference, living, hotel rooms, and so forth. It's a kind of city center. And since I'm always going for movies and stories inside the movies, you can see the apartment building with gardens with swimming pools. On the right hand, you see the conference center and the shopping areas. It's a vertical city, I would say. So if we go close, I'm going back to the beginning, talking about deconstructivist architect and the jumping whale. Here the whale is really jumping out of the image. This is a story inside the story. So this is natural and artificial intelligence. A friend of mine, a very famous German brain research biologist, uses this image as for the beginning of his lecture, and he says, the brain of the fly, the solution, this little brain is bringing in milliseconds from these solutions, and from this short time, this big computer can only dream on, and it will take another decades in order to get close with our artificial intelligence to the natural intelligence of this fly. Yeah, this is what I'm afraid of, that we architects will sit in a lockdown using the artificial intelligence to in order to create some buildings which are not architecture at all. This is the master plan, how we use digital applications and how we use artificial intelligence. The black one is the moment where when we are using it and how we are using it. Deep Himmelb. You know, Daniel can explain that much better than me. The computer learned all our projects, all our grant plans, and all our sections. And this is a project we are doing right now. It's a high rise, and this is the program you can see on the left side. And now we mix it up with all our facade details and so forth and see what it does. And at the very end, I show you, maybe you remember the movie 50 years Himmelb in 5 minutes. Now I show you the movie, how maybe Himmelb will look like in the future. And this is the point of view. Thom is approaching architecture. We have the same goal, creating three-dimensional space. He is approaching the thing very disciplined and very, very severe. Not rigid, because his hand, his graphic hand is much, it's too talented to be chained into a rigid frame. And this is our way of pushing the envelope of architecture into the next future. Thank you.
Thank you. It was amazing. So I think we can also start this by trying to address just a few things, because both of you are talking about also using AI in your architecture practice, and in many cases, yes, our AI can be used for very pragmatic aspects. like on construction side and helping on that side. But I think the more interesting discussion will be how AI can be used actually in the creative process. And how do you see, in a way, or where do you see the potential of that? Both of you showed, different examples where you use AI in creative process. So I'll just be curious, to start there a discussion. Do you see there a problem, or do you see a sort of AI can be something that helps architects? AI can augment, in a way, your native ability, in a way, like also Thom was showing, like this kind of like wide variety of iterations that you can explore and check, in a way, different strategies, and then help you, in a way, come up with a better decision perhaps. So if you can elaborate on that, or we can have a discussion about that, would be great. So maybe Mr. Prix, you can maybe expand on that.
No, Thom should start.
No, it's interesting because we took a bit different approach towards this conversation. Wolf, I would title your lecture "History of the World Part 1." This broad relationship between the very beginning of your work till the current work. And I would think that it would lead to a quite different discussion of AI. And it actually touches on some things we talked about before this conversation went public. In that there is an absolute continuity from your earliest work to your current work, which is extremely clear and is enormously intuitively driven with instincts that have been developed over decades. And again, I showed something that was much more kind of limited and was just focused on a very particular kind of an idea that had to do with an operational strategy that's trying to harness some of the characteristics of architecture that come out of a more instinctual set of desires that are organized, and they're somewhat. And again, Daniel, I would put the question back to you. That as you look at, because I'm showing you 3 very early research projects that have now systematized a language of combinatory behavior that's looking for accident and chance, and that's looking for the relationship between things. And it's a bit more limited, I would have said, based on Wolf's last conversation with the conversation of the fly. And then I'm wholly aware that it can't reach human instinctual gestalt capabilities, right? And then when I'm looking at something that it is a bit more primitive because we're limiting it to the abilities of the mechanics of the processes that are now available at AI in terms of their ability to help us form a very defined condition using 4 found conditions and making connections between those 4 primitives to make more complex things, right? That come out in both in 3-dimensional form and that come out in 2-dimensional form as an analysis. And then the first attempt to make very literal work out of that. And for me, I connected very much to my early kind of watching somebody like Peter Eisman in the numbered houses, and then it comes with huge limits. And I'm hyper aware of those limits, right? And I'm also, again, it'd be a question to Wolf. I would think, Wolf, would be very possible that you would kind of cringe even at the results of those 3 pavilions, because there's an organization that shows up that violates a further openness of what I'm trying to achieve, right? In terms of the use of chance, accident, et cetera, that develops a human complexity that, again, I think is the basis of Wolf's work. That it's actually, maybe, I would even argue that with Wolf, it's maybe impervious. I agree with the last comment that it won't be useful in his lifetime, that we're going to have to wait a while before it can even vaguely catch up to what his interests are, having to do with his very personal talents, which are somewhat extreme. And I'm again, I'm aware of the limitations, but it'd be, again, for me, I'd turn it over to you, Daniel, or to a critic, that you yourself can now evaluate the kind of, at least where I am in this process, or kind of where we are in this process in terms of producing the complex behavior that would go back to what Wolf talked about, and I did not talk about, of an architecture that operates within economic, social, cultural, environmental terms, right? And the kind of the vastness of the complexity of our discipline, which so few architects grasp, that don't have an interest in the ambition or the potential of architecture in its kind of infinite in the infinite amount of things that it deals with the stuff, right, that it can talk about. And because I would have said the difference in architectures is much less about style. It's about the nature of how we define the problem. It has to do with how we question and our ambitions that have to do with the questions we ask. Make sense?
Very much. But Thom, this now I have a problem with the language again. This is the old discussion between the German language and the English one. You used very often the word limited and instincts, which are, in my point of view, in my understanding of the translation of the words limit and instinct, it's much too superficial. Your projects are not limited. Maybe you want to go to the borderline, to the limit, by investigating all that with all your ability of drawing and artificial intelligence and whatever you use. But I cannot see one limited project in your CV. And instincts, for me, sounds like, you know, animals have instincts. I would rather replace this word in my German thinking by subconscious procedures. And limit, I would, I cannot find the word right now, but I have to think about it. Because in our understanding of limit, that would put down the deepness of your concepts and of your architectural sensitivity. You understand what I'm talking? I always have these problems with design and entwerfen. I had this discussion with Eisenman all the time, and with, of course, our friend Eric Moss, because I say you will never understand Kafka if you.
You know, it's interesting though. The English maybe there's a connection now, but the whole notion of a stream of consciousness, it was originally kind of even termed, and it was by an English, Alexander Mayne, who happened to be British, and it was in the middle of the 19th century. But what was interesting in the beginning notion of stream of consciousness was it was about the accessibility to sensations, and something much more complex than the singularity of the intellect or thinking within national terms. And I would have said that absolutely your work is completely connected to the notion. And if you looked at a Faulkner, if you looked at a Joyce, you could look at the certain characters. A Faulkner would be fascinating for an architect because he used stream of consciousness and his realism of storytelling, and he could connect the two and it would make a direct connection to our world that operates. The essence of the work, I would claim, is still stream of consciousness, and it has to do with broad sensations, and is it a much more complex kind of notion that would connect to dream states and all the kind of stuff you think about. And yet it intersects and it aligns with the rational world of engineering and radical kind of pragmatics and on, and the political and economic demands of the project, which you're so aware of. And it's in fact that that alignment or that intersection between the obligation of the rational and the stream of consciousness, which is so much you as an architect, that you've in fact somehow have whatever the synaptic kind of capability of making those connections of left right, yeah, that you talk about very clearly.
Yeah. Music is the connection.
Hear the bird?
Yeah.
My son's calling me from Brooklyn. I won't answer him right now. I'll call back. Part of the world today. Here we are on Zoom, and you being in Vienna, me still trying to wake up in LA. And I need another cup of coffee, and I'm getting a call from my son in Brooklyn who said wants something.
Yeah.
But it's funny, Wolf. I would have thought that I would have thought that the usefulness of AI would be different between the two of us. And my own observation would be I would question its usefulness to you. I think I operate in a more logical framework, and I also have more kind of simple jobs. The kind of work I do is not very. I work with day-to-day projects and common projects, and they demand a kind of a rationale, which I'm an American for sure, and in the U.S. it's a highly kind of pragmatic culture, and I'm very process driven, and so it's augmenting, and I tried to make that clear. It's augmenting something I'm already doing, which is already process driven, and that process takes. You would have never said that, I don't believe. I showed you pieces of the Giant project in Shanghai, and they literally come out of the process, and I'm just nodding my head, yes or no, as I'm moving things around. And I can't imagine you working that way. You have full control of the work, and you would never give, my guess is, you wouldn't turn over decisions, formal decisions, to a process. And I would have said that differentiate. We come at work very differently, and I am closer to I don't know, characters that use operational strategies. An Eisman would be an obvious one, and you're one that is much more in control of the process as a singular character. And then I would think it would make our use or interest in AI quite different. Like I looked at your examples of using of AI and going, I'm not totally kind of buying it because you already can do that. And I would be more in your last conversation that it hasn't caught up yet. And I don't think it's even close to how kind of you can operate within my guess. Oh, the sketch is fantastic. And for the audience, I think it'd be really interesting. And when I was looking at your document of sketches, I was fascinated in something that's done, and you tell me, between 15 seconds and 2 minutes, the amount of information in that document, in that final product, is a lifetime. And it spans every conversation we had. Within that is architecture in formal terms, artistic terms, in social terms, in economic terms, in terms of gravity and an idea of how kind of how we work in terms of mass. And it's taken place in 15 seconds. It's just boom, right? And I'm working through a much more tedious kind of set of operational strategies, of which AI can speed up a bit and is useful to me. And then I can look at many more operations, but I'm much more dependent on that strategy. And the work is very much connected very literally to that operational method, et cetera. And it doesn't come from what we call intuition. It doesn't start. In fact, at the beginning, there might be nothing. It's just instincts of some direction of the questions I'm asking. And I think yours shows up. Again, you tell me if I'm incorrect, but my sense is it shows up very early, and it's kind of insanely complete in terms of the amount of information in that early sketch. Am I off?
You know, the sketch of the open house. Yeah, this is an example for using the subconscious in order to get more than just a regular building. Yeah, to change the vocabulary, even the formal vocabulary. Yeah, to get rid, to liberate space. But in the moment, we start to think about in an conventional architectural way by doing plans and structures and blah, blah, blah. We are very disciplined and working in the team. Now, since the projects are getting bigger and bigger, there is no blind sketch anymore. Yeah, no sketch anymore with closed eyes. It's the latest drawings are more strategy drawings within the team I'm working with in our office can move around how they want to move. Only when they're crossing the borderline of the line, we have to discuss it. So, yeah, this is clear. You are working the same way, but in a different, let's say, from a different education. I know this Anglo-Saxon educational style, which I learned when I came to SIAC, talking about everything, but not talking about references in literature, talking about codes and rules of other things. That was very, very strange for me to see that, because in Europe, they couldn't talk about their projects.
Right.
It was stumbling. Yeah? I don't know what, if you hear Dominic talking about his house, it was crazy. Right. Because he couldn't express but these buildings are really great.
Right.
So, and you are doing that in the Anglo-Saxon style, having always a concept, a philosophy at hand.
My great-grandfather was born in Germany, so you're very Viennese and very Austrian. I'm a mutt. I'm a little this and a little that, and so I have no idea which part dominates my brain. But Wolf, I'm going to bring up something that I wanted to ask you the last time we talked, that I thought the young people in the audience, the students, would be interested in. And that I remember I got very interested in James Stirling as a very young man, and he had a huge influence on me, and particularly in the three, the Leicester, Oxford, Cambridge. And they were all kind of really odd buildings. And it took me years to kind of understand why I was interested in them, other than the dialogue and certain things that were taking place on the work. And in fact, the work was very kind of clumsy and kind of very awkward. And it was a bit like De Chirico when he wanted to become a classical painter. He couldn't paint. And he had minimum kind of facility, actually. And it had a huge influence on me as a teacher, in that I realized that it started differentiating the nature of how I looked at architecture in terms of their pure kind of talent. And that I actually appreciated certain people that operated conceptually that weren't talent driven, because I would have said he was actually kind of a very clumsy kind of character. And I appreciate the clumsiness. But anyway, out of that came kind of thinking of how different we work and how different our students are. And again, I look at you as a person of just immense innate talent that's on board. I don't see myself that way. I'm somewhere between, and I'm closer to Stirling. And I define the nature of a necessity of needing an operational strategy, needing a process that guides me or that's useful for me in developing the kind of work I'm interested in. And it's an assessment of a very personal kind of an assessment. And for me with teaching, it becomes interesting because it doesn't mean that everybody has to just have pure talent. because now we're down to 0.01% of the population, and we could stop teaching, honestly, right? Because if you have, by the way, when you're people of that talent, you included, and you look at the Corbusiers, you look at the Mises, and you look at the Sarnes, they don't have to go to school. There's no need to go to, or they get kicked out of school, even better yet, right? And I think this goes back to the AI conversation also, AI conversation. And I think it would have a difference in terms of where our own abilities lie, or our own personal kind of brain structure, kind of how we work. And again, you might agree or disagree with my assessment, because again, I see you as someone that's usually kind of talent driven and don't need a lot of this stuff, that you're very singular as an artistic character. And I think I'm much more in need of relationships, of dialogue, of words, of methods, etc., because I'm going to be working off of things, because I don't assess myself of having the same whatever that is, the way we kind of create things. But I'm looking at Daniel too. I don't know how you're going to moderate this, but it would seem like the whole conversation with AI would be extremely different, having to do with our creative instincts, and kind of where, if we could locate kind of where our work is coming from. Don't you think that it'd be extremely kind of different? Because again, I'm asking you, Wolf, it seems though when you're comfortable with your isolation as a singular figure, right, that you would have a different kind of relationship for even needing AI. It just it can't catch up with you yet, right? And again, does it make any sense at all when I'm talking about it?
Can I add something here? And maybe Mr. Prix can correct me if I'm wrong. But my assumption in a way about, or what I observed from working with Coop is that in a way, over decades, in a way, the office, in a way, our design methodology in the office was always to work in this kind of very open process, driven by architectural ideas in a way that you're where you utilize multiple type of tools, and in a way what you're doing, you're playing with these kind of translations from one medium to another in a way to enable, let's say, different various interpretations that you might have for that project. And then what we are doing, we are treating all these kind of individual outputs as being a sort of found object, in a way to inspire new ways of how we perceive things, how we articulate through their, in a way, translation architectural vocabulary. So for us, it's almost like it's this kind of accumulation, like, of knowledge that constitutes almost like the space where we are working in, like the conceptual space is this kind of accumulation, in a way, accumulation of knowledge acquired in a way by using different techniques, methods. So it's not so much just an AI doing something for us. I think for us, it's mostly AI is just a small part in the entire process here. So I think, I don't know, Mr. Prix, if you agree with that. But
I could have continued, because I talked about Jackson Pollock.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm the series of 100 I showed you.
Yeah.
Could have been organizing Jackson Pollock throwing paint on a horizontal surface, and challenging the notion of the whole discipline of painting, and I can now do the same thing he did in whatever, through his own intuition or instinct or whatever, and I'm literally can organize that, and I can actually even separate the number of, the 5 colors he threw down and how he threw it down, and it was physical. He's moving his arm at a certain fixation. It was actually incredibly mechanical what he did. You look at it now, and it can be done by it could be the machines that Wolf showed in his office, right?
Yeah.
In fact, it can incredibly organize when you look at them in current terms, right? And especially with kind of AI, right? And I am again kind of interested in like, again, the 100 pieces I showed you is replacing the architect. We haven't discussed that. The implication of Wolf's in the office, right? Sans people. And I'm talking to my young people, the students now, going, when you look at these 100, and they were done in 1 days of scripting, right? And it's just the beginning. There'll be another series after that we're getting more and more kind of specific in terms of being able to make determinations of what they are, edge related, highly differentiated, less different. We can start giving them more demands, right? And increase the desires that go into the AI. And I'm looking at my students going, you should be worried about this because I'm not going to need you, right? Yeah. And I'm already kind of anticipating I can have an office that instead of 80 people, there'll be 8 of us. And the good news is everybody makes 3 times the salary and actually makes a reasonable living as an architect. I'm producing hundreds of variations more than I can do with 10 times the amount of people. And I would think there's another conversation should be really interesting. If I was a 20-year-old, I would be scratching my head. And if I looked at those 100 things, number one, could you produce one of them, right? Mm-hmm. Right? You produce one of those images, right? And drawing or as a model, we want to talk about it, it's less 100. And not only that, I've got somebody operating on it where we're going to develop them under more complex terms. The drawing is just an output of an idea. And I would think, again, if I was not 76 years old and if I was 26 years old, I'd be scratching my head and going, better get on the ship here, right? If I'm going to be interested in being an architect, it does look like, and I don't know myself where it's going. I don't think we know, but it seems as though, yes, there's possibilities that it's going to develop the image behind Wolf right now, that it's more and more going to move in that direction with the correct intelligence guiding it. That isn't going to change. It's not going to change the desires and the initial kind of the initial demands, but it's going to radically change the mechanics. Let's say, right? No one's going to physically look at 3 alternatives. You're going to, through AI, look at 100 alternatives, and now it's going to increase. It's going to increase thinking. It's going to increase creative thinking and take away all the mechanics.
Thom, in the moment you add the program and some other things like climate and blah, 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 then not all of these 100 solutions will be suitable.
Right. They're not.
It's a formal game, which I agree is very funny. And I met an investor and he said, would you like to join our project? And Frank is doing it, blah, 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 and all these names. And I said, did they make a project? Because I looked at these things and he said, no, they don't know. I will invite them. And I looked and said, this is a project of Frank, and said, no, it's just, we stole it from artificial intelligence things. This is the simple solution for untalented architects and investors.
But I think,
many architects are using many things, and I'm not against it. Everyone can do what he wants to do, but never tell me that this is the future of architecture when someone is building a house with clay or whatever. Never tell me that's the only way. Yeah, that's the danger. Like I said, everybody is right, but nothing is correct.
Right. But what's interesting, Wolf, unlike the pavilions, which were purposely literal, it's most interesting as opening up options that are not literal. It just shifts your own options as you now enter the picture again. I assume that's how you would use it. Or in urban terms, I could have shown you, we're working on it right now, that last urban scheme in Chengdu. Now I can show 100 options of an urban scheme, which absolutely is useful to me because I'm looking at very kind of hard criteria and having to do with uses and all of the layers and layers of information, which now is something that becomes absolutely essential to the kind of problem I'm dealing with and the complexity of the problem.
So That's a proof that the term form follows function is completely incorrect.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because
Form precedes function.
yeah, maybe, yeah, true. Triggers or not, yeah. If
Yep.
it's a good shape, a gestalt, then it triggers functions.
Form shapes function. It
Yeah,
comes, it's prior. Absolutely. No question.
but in the moment you implant more technical issues or more social issues, then the artificial intelligent thing gets more and more in the hand of the architect again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I have my next. It's 1:30. I had an hour and a half for this. We okay?
Yeah, that's okay.
It's funny not seeing an audience. We got an audience out there.
Yeah, we have audience here, but right now there are. Let me see if there are some questions.
no, not please, not.
No questions.
No answers. Questions, yeah. You can answer that. Thom, it was great to see you. Actually, I want to see you live sooner or later.
I'm going to steal that one, Wolf. That's a good one. We don't want questions. We just want answers. Okay, guys, I gotta run. Wolf, great as always, man. It was really good.
Good to see you.
Daniel, nice.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think it was a very interesting discussion. And from the feedback here on the chat, actually, people really enjoyed it. Yeah, maybe there is going to be another future possibility where we can continue this kind of discussion. I think that would be amazing.
But in one of the essays I did, I got a question from somebody in the audience, and they asked me, doing things over Zoom, do you miss the applause at the end of your lecture?
Yeah, true. Yeah,
I said, damn right I do.
Yeah.
Talking to my own computer, looking at my face.
Yeah.
Man, they're pretty crazy.
Thom, look, I give you an applause.
Okay,
Mr.
guys.
Mr. Prix, can I put a question to you?
Yeah.
Somebody's asking why, if you can explain why you are so obsessed with the Rolling Stones song that you are playing.
What?
Somebody is asking in the chat why you are so obsessed with the song from Rolling Stone that you're always playing when you are showing Coop Himmelb work.
You mean Gimme Shelter?
Yeah.
It's a good architectural song. And I have to say, there are two stories why I like Gimme Shelter so much. One is, this is where we discovered that the Stones, that Keith Richards is playing an open-tuned guitar, which makes a completely different sound and is a very driving sound, number one. Number two is when my son saw, when he's a guitarist, as you know, Thom, when he came in our office and works for me just as a student of music, he saw the image of the rooftop. And he said to me, hey, that reminds me a lot on a solo of Keith Richards in Gimme Shelter. The tension and the tension rods and all the things are like bending the strings. And the last story, which is a very good story. I told you, Thom, that Keith was a host for a friend. The friend left his guitar in his apartment. And Keith tried to play it and said, oh, that has a great sound. I take it to the studio and we record, at this time, Gimme Shelter was recorded. And the intro, you can hear that quite clearly. At the intro, Keith was playing the guitar. And you know, it goes like that. And this tone is the most important tone in the whole rock area. For me, it's a description of this soft material we should use in the architectural future. Yeah, and while playing, wait a minute, while playing it, then he bent the guitar and the neck broke. So this sound is not repeatable. Is that a good story about art?
It's an amazing way to end the discussion.
Okay, next time we'll start another one. I'm going to start with Stevie Ray Vaughan, and it'd be in Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
And same thing. And it'll be definitely stream of consciousness and how to shut your brain off. I don't know if you know that particular one, Wolf, but in Austin, it's just kind of his most famous concert. And
I was there and I saw him playing.
There's a guy that comes by, replaces guitar, and it's just, I should students say, you're looking at a professional. This is a guy that knows what he's doing. And he'll tell you got to shut your brain off before the music starts. Hey guys, see you in a bit.
Thank you very much, Thom.
Thom, bye.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prix. And I hope to talk with you soon. Yeah.
Yeah, we should talk because the last movies I didn't show it, cut it off.
Yeah.
Really is very beautiful with the
Yes.
clouds, and we will post it and courtesy and copyright by Daniel. It's great,
Yes.
really great.
Deep Himmelb is there in the office, still learning. It's getting better and better.
Yeah, great.
Thank
So,
you, Mr.
guys,
Prix. Yeah.
In the world, hello, see you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Daniel, bye. We talk.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.